breaking right now, the mainstream media and the political class are launching a war on Reform UK. Nigel Farage's party, they say, now poses a danger. A danger. And what you're going to see happening more and more now are despicable attacks, not just on Reform UK, not just on their leadership, but on their voters as well, who they are going to degrade, who they are going to put down. For example, in the Times today, one Labour MP described Reform members as keyboard warriors. Quote, many of these are in their Transformers pyjamas in their mum's basement, but what we haven't yet is seen Reform on the doorstep or speaking to voters. So it's begun, Kathy, and you have predicted this, writing on X. Wait for the demonizing, labelling and smearing of Reform UK and Farage to begin, with a delighted BBC ready to report each and every attack as fact. So it's begun. The attack on Reform UK has begun.
It brings back the fruitcakes and loonies. What was the David Cameron thing? You know, it's a smear.
Yeah, and Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables speaking about Trump supporters.
Deplorables. I mean, I think the terrible thing is, again, with the sort of it is how these epithets are become very effective brands of sort of demonization and tarring. And we have got to call them out every minute because they do stick. And they get repeated, of course, by the mainstream media, by the corporatist mainstream media that fundamentally supports the uniparty narrative and doesn't challenge any of this. So, it's up to us. I don't know what else we do except for keep calling it out and show them up for the prejudiced, biased, hateful people that they are to be tarring and labeling other people.
And they just don't get it, do they? Because this MP has also described the fact that there's been little scrutiny of, quote, how absolutely loopy Reform UK policies are. What's loopy about wanting to maintain your borders, about wanting to stop the boats? Actually, I think it's the opposite of loopy, is it not?
Well, I mean, Nigel Farage's speech at after the election, when he gave a speech at the NEC. Oh, no, it's just before the election. He sat out. He gave a wonderful sort of, not a magnum opus, but it was a sort of Herculean speech without a note, where he went through all of Reform's policies. It really was a magnificent speech at the end of his electioneering. And there was one policy after another, and I was just going cheer, cheer, tick, tick, cheer, cheer, tick, tick. I mean, through from, there was nothing loopy about them at all. They were the type of common sense, socially conservative policies, because people are basically socially conservative, sensible policies that everybody wanted, that the Conservative should have been on any Conservative manifesto for years and haven't been. But I think this might backfire on Labour.
Well, this is a movement that they are terrified of. And for good reason, by the way. I mean, you see the collapse of the other mainstream political parties, Kathy. Quite the opposite is happening with Reform UK. Its membership has swelled to 76,000. They've added 10,000 since the election, 25,000 in the 4 weeks of the campaign. I mean, this is now a real force which is gathering momentum, quite the opposite of every other major political party in the country, including, by the way, Labour and the SNP, which are completely cratering when it comes to their membership and when it comes to their movement. And to describe Reform UK MPs and policies as loopy, and to describe Reform UK members and voters as being keyboard warriors sitting in their mum's basement, they just don't get it. And what they are doing is showing their absolute snobbery when it comes to the real heroes, I think, of this country. But look, I want to show you Rupert Lowe, who is, I think, a really great guy, Reform UK's great Yarmouth MP. This is a very successful businessman. He is donating his entire MP salary to a charity every single week. And you can't look at this man making this point and tell me he's loopy.
But what I do know is that when I sit in Parliament, it doesn't function properly. It is not working. It's a duopoly. It is a two-party state. It's almost as if, Tories go to the Labour, well, it's your turn to have a play with the train set now, and then it'll be handed back to the Tories. Well, that is not going to do the country any good. We need some disruptors, and we're disruptors, but we are reflecting what the majority of people in the country want. And I object to the media who basically say we're a sort of an upstart. No, we're not. We got 4.1 million votes, and next time we're going to get a hell of a lot more.
And actually, what's so interesting about that, Kathy, is he's saying exactly the same thing as Michael Sheen, the actor, the hard left actor, who I actually completely disagree with about everything politically, but I played him on the show yesterday because he was making a very similar point that actually, I think that the uni party has to be broken, and they are fighting against what is the inevitable here, which is there has to be a complete revolution of the UK political system because the majority is not being represented.
No, the Labour, like the Tories, are in complete denial about their out of touchness with ordinary people and with the mainstream view. What I found interesting with the election with Reform is how many seats it came second in to Labour, where Labour won and it beat Conservatives. I mean, we had one of our writers, Paddy Benham Croswell, and he was down doing Swansea West. He began with himself and his partner doing the canvassing. At the end of the first week, he got 20 local volunteers. And he ended up with an extraordinary number of votes, coming second, with no, and Farage had acknowledged it with that the other newest latest Reform MP, that there wasn't a party machine in action to help them. Paddy did that against this chap called Torquil something, can't make it up, double barrel name, PPE, Oxford, whatever, I'm not sure whether that's exactly right, but you get the gist, who'd been catapulted into that seat by the Labour Party, who had the entire machine working for him. And that is the power of reform, and that is a reflection of the need for the party.
Do you believe, Kathy, that Nigel Farage can be Prime Minister in 2029?
Let's believe it. Yes, I think we must. So my late husband always used to say, if you want something, visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right,
we'd be driving along and he'd say, oh God, where are we going to find? I'd say, where are we going to find a parking space? We should have got a taxi. We shouldn't have come in the car. And he'd say, oh, I'm just visualizing the parking space, Kathy. And boom, up came the parking space. I'm visualizing Nigel as being the next Prime Minister, because the more you visualize it, the more it seems absolutely likely and possible.
I think we have to believe. And I think if you look at what's happening across Europe, Meloni in Italy, I think Le Pen will end up being president of France at the next presidential election. I think there is this sweeping of populism for very, very good reason. I don't view it as a scary thing. And I do think it's possible, because what actually gives me the most practical hope is that Nigel only had 4 weeks to campaign before the last general election. And it was actually not the seats they won that I was most excited about, Kathy. They were maybe a little bit more predictable. It was the seats in which Reform came a pretty close second to Labour against all odds. You know, these were largely red wall seats. I think there was something like 90 of them actually where they came second to Labour. And I think after 5 years of this absolute misery, and let's be honest, this isn't things can only get better. This isn't Blair style. I mean, this is honestly misery from day one. And I do believe it. What do you think Farage has to do, though? Because, you know, he is someone who is hugely charismatic. He's our version of Donald Trump without any doubt. But is he focused enough? Is this something that he is committed to? Because it's going to be an all-encompassing project, isn't it, for him to turn this party into a party of government, especially when we see those forces in the mainstream media and the elite class completely against reform.
He's going to have to be terribly strong and get all the energy again that he used over his sort of how many year fight to get the vote on Brexit, and he has to go beyond obviously being an immigration party, though immigration obviously is a really key issue economically, culturally. It's obviously up at the top. His big problem is that his biggest enemy is the mainstream media. They will not support him. It's extraordinary, their snobbery. They don't understand that he's actually the most talented politician that we have and has had several years. No other politician can speak like this. No other politician has got a command of his brief like him. I defy any other politician in Britain today to stand up and be able to talk on the hoof without a note like he does on anything. I've been to things where he's opened himself up to audience questions. He can answer anything. He is very in command, and he is not given due sort of like respect for that by the mainstream media at all. And of course, by the BBC have just pilloried him and treated him and demonized him over, since 1997 or whenever the first European elections he was fighting. So that is the problem. Isn't in him. It is a problem how to get over this enormous institutional bias against him. But I would perhaps one thing I'd like to see, but it's step by step, some really key expert advisors around him, so to perhaps up his game a little bit. And I can't think or name who these people were. I'm not going to say it, but really people whose credentials and whose authority and whose knowledge is you can't argue with. I'd like to see a small group of those sort of people around him, and it wouldn't be the first time it happened. I'm old enough to remember Harold Wilson becoming prime minister, and he wasn't a good prime minister, and it was all a disaster, Labour again. But he was clever in that he got top Cambridge and Oxbridge academics around him, and everyone. It sort of, put him on the front foot.
The great thing about being independent now is I only tell you about products that I use and truly believe in and think can improve your life like they have mine. So let me talk to you about Verso. As you probably know by now, I've entered my 40s thinking about staying healthy. And one of the ways I did that actually was looking for ways that I could be fit and sharp, but also, I guess, find out how scientific evidence can help reverse the aging process with interventions. And so scientists like David Sinclair have done that. So I was looking for a product that I knew would enhance everything I was already doing, also backed up by solid evidence. This product is called Cell Being by Verso. It has scientifically proven ingredients that fight the effects of aging by increasing NAD+ levels. I hadn't heard of them, but it's so important because it is the stuff that powers every single cell in your body. Wow, it's made a difference to me. I've been using this product every morning for months now. It's been genuinely transformative. My fasting is easier. I've lost fat. I've lost weight. The team at Verso tell me it's due to its blood sugar regulating effects, which lead to fewer cravings. I'm sleeping better. I wake up with more energy. I even feel happier too. So this has taken years off my life. I'd love you to experience the same thing. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced to guarantee that you're getting what you pay for. And I'm very excited to say that to March our launch, Verso is giving you an amazing offer. So if you head right now to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you'll save 15% on your first order. All you need to do is use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN. The link is in our show notes on YouTube and Rumble. But to repeat, bui.ver.so/outspoken, use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN. Yeah, I agree. Look, the thing is, I worked with Nigel, obviously, for, how many years? 3 years at GB News. He is an absolutely brilliant man, but he is someone who tends to only trust his own judgment, and he loves surrounding himself, Kathy, and I like this to an extent, but by very talented youngsters, so that he is always calling the shots. But I do agree with you. I think he needs to build a proper political operation around him and give himself that support and give the party that support. I also think what we need to see are some brave Conservatives start to defect. Suella Braverman, the Tory party is not your home anymore. I mean, I call her Superwoman Suella, right? I love her. I'm a big fan. But you've got no home in the Conservatives anymore. They don't believe in you.
Some of them don't get it still, though. They just
No,
don't
they
get it.
don't.
I just even wonder whether they should be going there. They've had, I mean, Robert Jenrick's an obvious one. He doesn't have a place in that party. It is a woke party. Even Priti Patel didn't get half of it. Kemi Badenoch doesn't get half of it. They're all too careful and cautious. They always are looking at what the left's doing first. They don't. 100%. I don't know whether they know what their conservative principles are any longer. I mean, I think Robert Jenrick is the only one. At least he resigned as immigration minister, and then became very outspoken himself. But
I think he's actually got it in the bag. What I find so funny, Kathy, is just how out of touch the mainstream media is with the actual members of the Conservative Party. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the Conservative Democratic Organisation, which was all about returning democracy to the party. Well, the party machinery actually fights so strongly against that because they know they're never going to elect a Tom Tugendhat, a James Cleverly, even a Kemi Badenoch, who is completely controlled by the sort of mainstream of the conservative, big C conservative movement. So I think Robert Jenrick has got this in the bag. But what's going to be critical then is how does he deal with reform? How does he deal with Farage? Because the only way that I think the party can be saved is some sort of arrangement between the two.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And you think... And if I don't know, it's very the Conservative Party. I still say it. The Conservative Party deserved to die, and it pretty much has died. I mean, I couldn't get interested in this leadership election.
No, I'm with you. It's irrelevant.
Lesser and lesser. The Tory leader. If you go through every year, it just sort of. One thing about Tories from Thatcher onwards, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.